lecture in a series of lectures for a month. It is a great honor to host Professor Yousef Al-Obaidan, a professor of political science and former member of the Shura Council in Qatar. In the autumn of 2022, after a period of preparation, the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies launched the unit for the studies of the Gulf and the Arabian Peninsula, based on the vision that the studies in the field of social sciences and political sciences in the region are not in line with the key role that this region plays in diplomacy, politics, culture, energy, sports, etc. This shortcoming or shortage of material has several factors, local and foreign, and it has to do with a stereotype that was targeting this region for a long period of time. There are several centers focusing on Gulf research, but they base their work on political factors or specific fields in the social sciences and political sciences. This actually was the key objective for the region and the Gulf countries, the objective being understanding the dynamics of the development of the societies in the region based on the social and political human sciences currently. And this unit aims at contributing to filling this gap in collaboration with peer centers, in addition to offer objective knowledge regarding the societies of the region based on the needs from within and not stereotypes or politics, in addition to strengthening the role of specialized scientific research. So, the main vision of the unit is that the Gulf countries were not given a deep when it comes to the studies, when it comes to other fields other than the energy. So we need to focus on anthropology, sociology, and history. This is why this unit aims to revisit the literature regarding this part of the world in order to draw a map when it comes to the research needs and build a network of researchers with common fields of interest, be it from the region or from abroad. This unit actually implements its objectives by launching research projects about the region based on the needs and the studies that can be published in books and different periodics and publications, to include workshops, seminars, conferences, and the unit in this regard is going to organize the annual forum that is usually held in December of every year. So in 2023, we are going to go back to the two-track system. And the first track is going to be about the Chinese Gulf relations, and the second track is about cultural policies in the Gulf. Of course, the Arab Center and the unit relies on the assistance of specialized researchers. So this evening marks the first event, and we are hosting Dr. Yousef Al-Obaidan, who is going to talk about the governance in the state of Qatar. You are welcome, Dr. Yousef. We are honored to have you with us. And Mr. Abdulrahman Albaker is going to moderate this session. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening once again. This is the first event hosted by the unit at the level of the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies, and this opens up the series of lectures that the unit is going to host. We would like to thank Dr. Yousef Al-Obaidan for honoring us with his presence. Dr. Al-Obaidan was among the first persons in 1982 to get a doctorate in political science from the University of Cairo. His thesis focused on the regime in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar. And he got a master's degree in political science in 1978, and his thesis was the political institutions in Qatar. Dr. Al-Obaidan specialized in the political systems in the Gulf countries, and this is what is going to be highlighted this evening. The experience of our speaker is basically what sets his experience apart. It's bringing together diplomatic and political work, and he worked at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs before 1974, and then he moved to the embassy in Beirut until he reached the level of minister in 86. And Dr. Al-Baidan was participating in the building of the state in Qatar, and he participated in the delegations with Sheikh Khalifa bin Hamad, the deputy emir, in the talks of the union, and he participated in this delegation, and he played an important role on the delegation of the United Nations, and he also partook in the Constitutional Committee and provided the draft in 2002 to be promulgated in 2004. And Dr. Al-Abadan contributed at the level of Qatar University, and he was the Dean of the Economics and Administration faculty. He has several publications and researchers and peer-reviewed magazines. And Dr. Al-Abaidan actually focuses on the academic aspect and also the hands-on expertise. Dr. Yousef is going to deliver his lecture, Governance in Qatar, the Evolution of Political Participation Since Independence. We have 45 minutes, and then we will open the floor for 30 minutes of questions and answers. Thank you. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good evening. I would like to begin by expressing my deepest gratitude to the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies, and I would like to thank particularly the Dr. Azmi Shara, our dear brother and colleague, and the team working with him for this kind invitation. And I ask God the Almighty to grant us the capacity to talk about the governance in Qatar. This is one of the important aspects in the Qatari society, and our political system was built upon it since our independence. In reality, if we want to talk about the governance in Qatar, we need to begin by highlighting the historical background of the creation of Qatar. This entity, when it was founded by the founder Sheikh Jassim bin Muhammad, so the attempts have been ongoing since then, based on the Islamic teachings, and the Shura is at the core of these teachings. The researchers actually mention that when Sheikh Jassim met the elders of the state of Qatar, so they met in Bayat al-Ghrifi. It is in the souk now, and this is how allegiance was given to Sheikh bin Jassim. as a ruler. So Sheikh Jassim brought them together, the elders and the heads of tribes, and actually he consulted him regarding the rule of Sheikh Abdullah bin Jassim, and this happened in 1913. So this consultation actually is the historical background. So the elders of this country used to apply this concept of shura that we still have. And we need actually to think, if we go back to the beginning of Qatar. So what about the environment? It is a harsh environment. So several researchers, when they saw Sheikh Abdullah bin Jassim has expressed some reservation when it comes to the agreement with the kingdom in United Kingdom in 1916, Sheikh Abdullah did not accept to have a commissioner, a British agent here in the state of Qatar. So Britain actually sent an expert in the state of Qatar and wrote a report to the government of Britain. And he told them, so if we have an agent, where would he live? This is a primitive land, no electricity, no water, old houses of clay. So in order not to shock the British agent, focus or let him be in Bushehr and then in Bahrain. And the government actually agreed with Sheikh Abdullah to have these articles suspended until they were activated during the rule of Sheikh Ali bin Abdullah Al Thani in 1949.
Philip Blunt, the first British agent, was sent to Qatar. Education came very late, except for Quranic schools known as Katatib, which relied on teaching and memorizing the Quranic text with some arithmetic, nothing else, and there was ignorance abundantly prevailing in society because we had no formal education. The Quranic schools were spreading for a long time until, with the advent of the oil and excavation for oil, we started paying more attention to education, and Sheikh Muhammad bin Ali Al Mahmoud, may God have mercy on his soul, started with the first school in 1948, the Hamadi School. This is another matter. What matters here is in Qatar, there was no experience of participation. Some countries, like Kuwait, in the reign of Ahmed al-Jabir, appointed a council of consultation. The Bahrain, the council known as Ma'arif, or like a privy council. Qatar has remained as it was until Sheikh Ali bin Abdullah al-Thani came to power. During Sheikh Ali bin Abdullah's reign, actually this was like a juncture, a pivotal juncture in the history of Qatar, because we saw the first time oil being exported, and Sheikh Ali bin Abdullah from the Msa'id port, his father actually set the conditions for the first shipment, but his father died, and then Sheikh Ali took the reins, and Sheikh Khalifa was to be the heir apparent. And on the 10th of August 1949, Sheikh Ali took the reins of power, and the fruits of oil exports began to show. Schools were built, roads were built, and there was more attention to other aspects of life like modernization, culture. Sheikh Ali's reign lasted for 11 years, but there was no political organization whatsoever, no Shura Council, no council to aid the ruler, and it was a typical tribal system because of lack of education and ignorance of society. There was no means of consultation. Although the Sheikh Ali and his son Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali used to provide counsel to their father, and he used to consult some of the dignitaries of the country. Sometimes when there is a matter pertaining to commerce, he would ask the merchants. So Shura was always there, but it was not canonized, it was not legally organized. And Sheikh Ali also asked for the help of the British government. They sent him an advisor to help him run the affairs of his emirate. Although his advice was not mandatory, he used to be paid by Sheikh Ali. In 1950, started an administrative administration, like one for the health, one for roads and engineering, and they were headed by himself, except for customs and education. He kept that away from the British councils or advisors' interference. He did not allow him to intervene in these matters in education and customs. Other than that, he used to have a say in the administration of things. After that, his son Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali, there was an agreement, and the reins of the country were passed to the son, and also Sheikh Khalifa was confirmed again as heir apparent. This marked a new chain. The chain of decreeing laws and legislation in 1961 was the first law was decreed, was decree of the official gazette. And in Kuwait, as we know, Kuwait has preceded us in so far as establishing a parliamentarian system. The first council was established in 1960, and in the Emirates, in Sharjah, they had a legislative consultative council, but Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali, may God rest his soul, with Sheikh Khalifa, decided that there should be a preliminary step which paves the ground to be the beginning of a participatory system. Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali in 1964 established the first consultative council, Shura Council, with 15 members, made up of 15 members, headed by the ruler and the deputy ruler, Sheikh Khalifa. They were all members of the ruling family. One may wonder why all of them belong to the ruling family. As you know, the transformation from a tribal system into a more modern system was rather slow. The transition period was very long. It was good, however, because Sheikh Khalifa's insight proved that this was to the good and well-being of the Qatar experience in government, because we started with a very good step, and that is the step of appointment, then later on through elections. And in justification of this step by Sheikh Ahmed deciding that all members of the Shura Council from the ruling family, because Qatari society, this was very small and everybody knew each other, and they said that the members of the ruling family are better able to convey the wishes of the people to the ruler. So any citizen who cannot reach the ruler directly, or the ruler was busy, he can go and approach a member of the Shura Council to convey his request to the ruler. And members of the Shura Council would debate this and raise the matter with the ruler. So this was like the first building block. But despite the first step, and despite legislating for the way this council should run, and the members were appointed, but it never saw the light of day for reasons still unknown until now. This matter continued without any participation until the year 1968, when Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, announced the intention of the British government to withdraw from the Gulf countries in the 70s, which was a message to Gulf countries to prepare to fill the vacuum which would be created in the aftermath of the withdrawal of the British forces. Sheikh Rashid and Sheikh Said, they signed an alliance between them, and they invited the rulers of Bahrain, Sheikh Yousef, and the ruler of Qatar, Sheikh Ahmed, and Dr. Hassan Kamel prepared a memorandum which was called Al-Doha Memorandum, or the Qatari Delegations Memorandum, as a continuation of the Dubai Memorandum or Understanding. And until 1970, the UAE held successive meetings between Doha, Bahrain, and the UAE without much benefit. It was all in vain, and many differences appeared between which city to be the capital, the number of the ruling council, the powers of the head of the state and the prime minister. Although Sheikh Zayed was elected as a temporary president of the union, and Sheikh Hamad as the prime minister, and King Faisal and Sheikh Sabah al-Salim of Kuwait interfered with two delegations to mediate at the ministerial level. Britain also, through Sir William Luce, who is the political resident in the Gulf, but none of this was to any avail, and Qatar, as Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali, the ruler of Qatar, on the 2nd of April 1970, issued the founding articles of which was considered like a written constitution, and the first cabinet or council of ministers was formed with 10 ministers. This step did not cause any disgruntlement in Britain, although Qatar took this step, and it was still in the protection of the British Empire without being independent, but Britain did not express any reservations. And although in 1961 the British agent did not show any objections, this was read by observers as a sign of victory, and also Arab intellectuals were chosen to play a role, headed by the late Hassan Kamel. Bahrain followed suit and formed a council which was not named the Council of Ministers, but the Council of the State, and also the UAE. So all of these were indications that the union will not be there. I was a member of the delegation which Sheikh Khalifa sent to King Faisal to explain Qatar's position. People started laying accusations at the door of Qatar, UAE, Bahrain. Even President Sadat played a role in this. He was approached in case the situation deteriorates even further. Bahrain preceded everyone else by declaring its own independence. And then the UAE formed the United Arab Emirates of the Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and the rest of the seven. And this left Qatar no alternative but to seek its own independence, which was announced on the 3rd of September 1971. When the amended constitution in the reign of Sheikh Hamad was announced, there was an intention or a mention there, a stipulation that a consultative council will be formed of 20 members, with 4 being appointed, and the rest were to be elected, and law was passed to organize the process of elections. There is a written text, and the constitution stipulated that, but also due to many differences on the way the country should be ruled, this was frozen until the corrective movement on the 22nd of November 1972, where Sheikh Khalifa bin Hamad Al Thani took the reins of power in the country, and it was called the corrective movement because it took many vital decisions to reform things like sending ambassadors, receiving ambassadors. The most important aspect of it was the revival of the Shura principle or consultative principle, and this is the most important thing, because independence happened in the reign of Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali. Sheikh Khalifa sent me to him, and he sent me to Geneva, and in the presence of Dr. Hassan Kamel, I handed him the document in his parcel in Geneva, and we went to the UN. I was a member of the delegation with Dr. Hassan Kamel, and maybe Dr. Azmi knows these things, that a state, before it's established, should get the approval of the Security Council. Like if they use the veto, independence will not be granted. Similarly to what happened to Kuwait. When we, the Emirates and Bahrain, approached the Security Council gave its blessings and commended Qatar's step, and he mentioned Qatar by name because Qatar issued a temporary founding system, a constituency system to which amounts to a constitution which recognizes the principles of the UN. The Argentina and Denmark's members, non-permanent members, also commended Qatar's step. And then the approval of Qatar's independence was given, and a recommendation was submitted to the General Assembly, where every country carries an equal vote. Like, imagine if there is a red light, a yellow light, and a green light when the I think when we were accepted, we were number 116, Bahrain 114, UAE 115. All countries accepted, except even the Israelis accepted. They abstained, in fact. They did not object, except the South Yemen. It used to be called the Southern Democratic Yemen. They objected. And Muhammad Mubarak al-Khalifa apologized. The member of the Yemen said, I was ordered to do so. Anyway, it didn't matter with 112 votes in our favor. Going back to Sheikh Khalifa, the first idea of Shura Council, Sheikh Khalifa is considered the man behind the idea of the Shura Council. The first council, first Shura Council, was appointed with 20 members with an Amiri decree to their appointment, and Sheikh Khalifa decided that this will be for a duration and 1 year, then we will assess the situation, and after that use a system of election. But in fact, in 1971, this revealed a great amount of wisdom by Sheikh Khalifa. The nature of our society is known to everybody. It's all made up of known and limited families and clans and tribes. Sheikh Khalifa picked certain individuals from these families and clans. He chose 20 people, which was suitable to the situation. The Qatari society was that, and this step was not taken in a vacuum, although he prolonged the transitional period, and also his insistence for many years that these should be appointed. In Kuwait was 1 year, in Bahrain was 6 months, but in fact there was wisdom behind his decision, because our society is fundamentally different than Bahrain and Kuwait. They were ahead of us in education and urbanization and others. Sheikh Khalifa decided to phase in this transition and take some deliberate step. And the late Hassan Kamil said the principle of appointment still is applied in many countries, especially in the early stages of their political development. There is no harm in that. Some countries like England and others, Jordan, they have 2 houses for parliament, one by appointment, one by elections. But we thought that our society really cannot cope with that. This was raised in the committee dealing with the permanent constitution. I was a member of that, because we are a limited, small country, limited in size, limited in demography. Sheikh Khalifa every year extended their membership by appointment. And in 1972, in the first phase with the Shura Council, Sheikh Khalifa made the nature of the Shura Council not mandatory, but it was just they can come up with recommendations, and they can express their opinion by way of recommendation, non-binding recommendations. And they are not allowed to propose legislation. The articles finding this constitution allowed the council to discuss the proposed legislation submitted by the Council of Ministers. Then they give their recommendations, and the preamble will say, with Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the ruler of Kuwait, and after consulting the Shura Council, decree the following. This is how the situation was. In 1976, however, there was another development. Sheikh Khalifa increased the number of the Shura Council to about 30 members, adding like the 10 tribes which were not represented became represented, and also gave them a limited power, like regarding cultural, social, and economic matters and matters relating to the everyday life of society. For the Shura Council, rather than to wait for the Council of Ministers, they can take the initiative of proposing laws. But it did not ultimately change the nature of how the council works. It can only be recommendations. Some will say that these are only recommendations, and no, I say no. I was a member of the Shura Council for about 4 years, and there are other colleagues who were there before me. The government used to accept 95% or 96% of the Shura Council's recommendations, and this is a very good thing. We had hundreds of minutes you can refer to see how the discussions were done objectively, freely, and I say to the new members that you can learn from these or from those minutes lessons you can heed, and incentives for your work in the future. Sheikh Khalifa has taken it upon himself, in fact, to follow a methodology of deliberately phasing in and using a gradual thing and avoiding any giant leaps to avoid any undesirable changes. And in my PhD thesis, Dr. Fathallah Al-Khatib, my supervisor, who was the foreign minister of the UAE, he said to me, now that you're a diplomat, you're an ambassador, you meet ambassadors, said, consult the Emir. So I went to meet Sheikh Khalifa, and I asked him about elections. He said to me, Yousef, listen to me, I'm not against the idea of elections, and I consider elections as a fundamental element of the democratic process. But in my opinion, until now, our society has not reached the phase where they can go through an experiment or experience like this. He said, now everybody is represented in the council. If I hold elections, maybe one tribe will have 10 candidates winning. What about the rest? What will happen to them? Elections is a good idea, but it does not necessarily bring forward all the people, all the competent people. In the Constitution Committee, some members suggested that everything should be by election. The Shura, 45 members all elected. We thought, no, we have to understand the nature of our society, the nature of our people. So therefore, we must add to that the principle not only election but appointment also. Maybe there will be competent people, but they may not have the means to win a seat. So therefore, we established another principle, and that is appointing 15 members. Sheikh Tamim, may God protect him, also encouraged the appointment of women, and he appointed 15 members according to the constitution, including 2 women. And although in the elections they did not win, we respect the will of the people when they decide to give their vote to a man or a woman. But we serve the country by appointing these 2 ladies rather than depriving women from having a voice. And people who were appointed, some were former members, they were competent people, and they could benefit. The council could draw from their past experience, and that way we can mix between what is traditional and what is modern. Also, the principle of deliberate or gradual phase. Robert Dahl, Malcolm Shaw have said that in the experience of people who came out of a colonial era and wanted to build their own political systems can never be equal in their experience to countries who have been living through a democratic process for 500 years. Some, of course, have taken this as a pretext, and for some countries, the new states like Qatar, which came out of the colonial era and wanted to combine between what's traditional and what is modern. Sheikh Khalifa first started with 20 members with closed powers. In 1970, expanded their membership, and then Sheikh Hamad, the Amir father, increased the membership to 35. He increased their powers, and they started giving the powers of questioning ministers. Of course, we don't have the situation whereby a vote of no confidence can be passed against a minister, but still, they used to call ministers to hearings before the council. I admired the rulers, Sheikh Khalifa and Sheikh Hamad, their wisdom. They did not immediately jump into things. They formed committees for the constitution and the municipality elections, local elections, and then lifted censorship from newspapers. So Sheikh Khalifa, after the formation of the Shura Council, invited Salim al-Luzi, who was the editor-in-chief of Al-Hawadith magazine from Beirut. He said to him, Your Highness, you started this new experiment with democracy and Shura. Can we understand from this that in the future you will have a council whereby half are elected and half appointed? The Sheikh said, we in Qatar, we don't want to take a leap in the dark. Our ambition is to have a system whereby competencies and competent people are chosen from our society carefully, and the council should hold deliberations which can come up with ideas, can help the ruler to better rule the country. So our ambition is to have parliamentary life based on competences, not on the whims and desires of the masses or people who have more power and influence. So therefore, when we train ourselves in the parliament, we start having popular trends which can help us achieve more advances ahead so that in the future we can advance more in our process of democratization. So therefore, he said we started this, and after the first amendment was passed, he said, thank God this amendment has avoided us any leaps in the dark. And as you know, there are two neighboring countries, Kuwait. The parliament was dissolved once in the Sheikh Jabir and Sheikh Ahmed and Sheikh Sabah, and three times later in Bahrain. The council was dissolved and they remained without a council for 15 years. Qatar went through this process without any hindrance or obstacles. I have a paper I published about the reasons for the transitional period. I think this has helped us because our society suffered from a demographic default. Maybe in 1970, a number of graduates were not more than 10, 15. So therefore, Hassan Kamel, the late Hassan Kamel, issued a memorandum, said it's okay for Qatar to use Arab people to appoint them as ambassadors until enough Qataris can take up these positions. Like, for example, I can appoint a resident ambassador in Cairo and make him a roaming ambassador in 3 or 4 neighboring countries, one in London and also to cover Scandinavian countries. So thankfully our Ministry of Foreign Affairs started this process, and with the passage of years, we and out of respect for the services of our Arab brothers who serve this country, we appointed them as experts and advisors in New York, Washington, Pakistan, London, Jordan, and so on and so forth. Germany, 6 or 7 experts were appointed there to help the new ambassadors to fulfill their responsibilities and discharge their duties. Thankfully, now we have more awareness and the democratic practices. We have become more experienced and people interact better. And believe you me, the Shura Council before elections, people used to follow anxiously what the council would be debating. Sheikh Hamad, when he came to power in 1975, the first steps he took, he lifted censorship and he abolished the Ministry of Information. In his term, the first municipality elections were held. The first time in the history of our country, citizens went to the ballot box objectively and with the utmost behavior and respect, so much so that the observers really praised this experience. Also, the establishment of a committee for the preparation of permanent constitution. I had the honor of being a member of this committee with a total membership of 32, and after 3 years in deliberations, the draft was issued, and the Amir father insisted that the Shura Council should be all elected. But the way the discussions went said we don't know who will be elected, and we do not want to repeat the experiences of some neighboring countries. So ultimately, we agreed on 15 being elected and 15 appointed, and the situation remained as such. until His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani became Emir after his father conceding his throne to him, and the first elections to elect the first Shura Council was elected, and we have 3 members with us here who were elected and who won overwhelmingly: Mr. Khalid Al-Obaidan, Mr. Isa Al-Nasr, and Mr. Khalid Al-Ma'adid. And now, as Sheikh Khalifa said, democracy is a double-edged knife or weapon. We do not want democracy to hinder our advancement. When the Qatari people saw what happened in Kuwait and Bahrain and other countries, they became convinced that if we go through this every day and the councils are dissolved, many projects will be hindered. We want a parliament to discuss matters objectively. We cannot judge a parliament by the first session, nor the second, nor third. In Kuwait, the first council took 2.5 years discussing the founding articles and the bylaws of the council. So we don't want people to say this council, this Shura council, didn't achieve anything, didn't accomplish anything. No, they have their powers, but we want to be gradual in this. I was happy that the Shura Council opened up the subject of education, which is something also the question of healthcare and inflation, etc. Maybe I've taken too much of your time. In conclusion, I say this is the gradual approach that Qatar and its leadership have followed. And Peter Mansfield about Arabs, he's a British author, said Qatar distinguished itself by continuity and the cohesion and between all the different establishments since Sheikh Khalifa came to power in 1972. This principle of consultation, we started it for the formation of a committee until we reached the stage where members were elected in the local government elections. So people have gradually learned and became accustomed to the idea, and now they are more prepared. Even the question of electing women. The constitution in Kuwait did not ban women from being elected to parliament, but there was a long time when the law remained as an obstacle. Then in the days of Dr. Mudi Al-Hmoud said to me, you preceded us. You gave Qatari women their rights on a golden platter. We had to struggle for 30 years to achieve that. So thankfully, women have won and they have joined the process, and we hope that they'll play a bigger role in the future. This will honor us. I leave it here and I leave the rest to your questions and answers. And thank you for your kind attention. I'm here at your service.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yousef, for this valuable lecture, during which Dr. Yousef highlighted the history of political participation in the state of Qatar. We started with the founding of the state, and we will give the opportunity for 2 questions and then answers, and then another round of questions for half an hour. Assalamu alaikum, Saeed Bimani from Oman. I am a doctoral student at Qatar University. Thank you so much, Doctor, for this valuable lecture. Of course, the experience of reign and the political regime in the state of Qatar witnessed challenges. And here I want to talk about the regional challenges more than the domestic challenges. And people who followed the experience of ruling and political systems in GCC in the Gulf countries know that there is actually some clinging to power, but Qatar broke this rule by uh, having the authority in the hands of relatively young leadership. And the question is, how can the GCC countries benefit from the Qatari experience in this regard? And how can we assure smooth, or how can the smooth transition to younger generations serve the GCC pathway? Mohammed Hussein from the Public Administration Program at the Doha Institute. Thank you, Dr. Yousef, for this presentation and this very clear illustration. I have two questions very briefly. This presentation, the process of governance in Qatar. Doctor, in your opinion, in 5 years to come, in 10 years to come, what will it become? What will we see in this regard? Second, if we read Qatar's experience in the Gulf context, how can Qatar benefit from other Gulf countries, which is the opposite of the question that was asked before me? Thank you. When it comes to what Brother Said from Oman said, Qatar actually faced several challenges, and as it is known, of course, we started with the experience, of course, our brothers in Oman. There's a lot of similarities actually between their experience and our experience because at the beginning, Sultan Qaboos, may God rest his soul, he was a wise man. He held elections, but the elections had their specificities from different province. There was a number of elected appointees, and the Sultan would choose out of them. And this is quite similar to the experience of the state of Qatar. Qatar faced several challenges, to include also the blockade that was imposed on the state of Qatar. It is true that His Highness the Emir faced the challenges in a bold, courageous, persistent manner because and eventually nobody benefited. Nobody won, nobody lost, and it is necessary for the Gulf to return to its old self. And thank God, the diverging opinions were dealt with, and this is something normal between brothers, and this friendly relation is going to continue between the Gulf nations. Qatar has a special state because the political scientists in the West actually agreed that the best political systems are the systems that go in line with the needs and the conditions and circumstances of the different countries. We implemented this system, and it is in line with our tradition, customs, and history. I talked about the change in power. We have Emiri systems. The Emiri systems are smooth, are stable, and we have in the Emiri and in monarchies actually it is the king is known, the Emir is known, the crown prince is known. The crown prince actually enrolls in the best programs and at the best universities because they are expected to rule the country. We do not have a vacuum when it comes to the constitution. And when the father Emir, His Highness Sheikh Hamad, conceded to his young son, His Highness the Emir Sheikh Tamim, actually the father Emir wanted the opportunity for the young generation to be to move forward, move the country forward towards a better future. So things are run smoothly within the ruling family, and this is why, with everything that happened, there was a smooth transition and there was no violence, and this is known by all the countries in the region. When it comes to the how can Gulf countries benefit from the Qatar experience? Qatar, it is known that, let's start by saying that the GCC is built on coordination. And so far, the ideas that were proposed when it comes to the union, etc., this has yet to be implemented, but the policy of coordination is still implemented, and the consultative body at the level of the GCC has 5 representatives from each country, and this committee deals with the drafted laws, etc. So there is coordination also between the parliaments at the level of the Shura Council, the Ummah Council, and the local councils, and the consultation actually happens in order for them to get to the better. And we have the monetary market, the common market. We have yet to implement them. Actually, the first country to suggest was Qatar. Sheikh Khalifa Hamad Al Thani actually suggested the common market, and his during his interview to with Salim Al Lawzi, he called for the creation of a joint Gulf market that would precede the political union, just like the common market that led to the European Union. So, step by step, gradually, the idea of this joint common market is was born by or was given by Qatar. And the question regarding the future, the 10 years, we hope that the current council, the current Shura Council, plays its role, and it is actually playing its role, and the Shura Council is keeping up with the current situation, and in addition to the proposed laws and decrees by the government. Of course, questions and confidence issues are mentioned in the Constitution, and we commend our deputies, our members of the Shura Council. They are wise and they are not reckless when because they do not exaggerate. This leads to problems. This is the secret of the continuity and the Qatari experience in general. Do you have any other questions? Assalamu alaikum, Mira Shamari from the security program. The Qatar approach after the invasion of Kuwait, did it affect the foreign policy of Qatar? And what about the relation with Iran? Does it play a role? Assalamu alaikum. Sarah Muhammad As-Sulaiti from uh, Public Policy Program. You gave us a historical overview when it comes to the Qatari experience and the political participation, the gradual process, and at some point there was a shortage when it comes to the diplomatic corps. Back then, when there was this gap or this shortage, how were the three powers created, the executive, the parliamentary, and the judiciary power or authorities? How were they created? How did they cooperate? What were the challenges that they faced in light of the shortage of diplomatic corps? And did we reach the level that is required, or these authorities need more efforts? What Sister Shamari said regarding this question, we need to know that at the level of the GCC, Qatar condemned the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait and participated in the coalition forces. And we actually supported our Kuwaiti brothers, Sheikh Khalifa, and uh, the father Emir actually was crown prince. They formed a committee, and the objective was to help Kuwaitis when it comes to accommodation and it comes to financial support. So Kuwait was supported by Qatar fully, and Qatar participated in the liberation of Kuwait. And Al Khafji battle is known without us delving in the details. However, when in any grouping or council, there are always diverging opinions because we are not talking about a federal union in order to say that there's one foreign policy, one defense policy. No, it is built on coordination. For instance, the council between Iraq, Egypt, Yemen, and Jordan. It failed. It was for 1 year or 2 years and then failed. The Maghreb Union didn't work. The African Union is not stable. The GCC Council, despite the challenges and despite all the difficulties, several observers say that had the GCC not taken the step to liberate Kuwait, or if this was the only thing that the GCC did, this granted this council a status at the international level. Some people say we are watching and listening to repeated statements with every meeting. This is not true, actually. The umbrella of the GCC is going to continue until we move forward one way or another. For instance, when Britain wanted to retreat from the country, there was several formulas, but these formulas were not implemented until the idea was proposed to create this GCC based on coordination. And thank God we managed to do so, and we started the joint measures in the fields of education, health, the youth, etc. But these steps are slow. Sometimes they are below the expectations and ambitions of the citizens of the Gulf. But the citizens of the Gulf are at the heart of this attention. Regarding what Sister Salati said, yes, we suffered from this shortage of cadre. Now we have several graduates. Back then, we had diplomats who had only high school level or even less. But now things have changed, and that was one of the challenges that the Qatari society had to face at the beginning of the independence. The scarcity of uh, graduate. So the Qatar University was created in 77, and the first graduates were in the 80s. So we have the authorities stipulated by the Constitution, the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. In the Constitution, it is actually stipulated by the Constitution, the legislative, and also the Emir, and the Council of Ministers, and the judiciary. And the courts actually issue verdicts in the name of the Emir. One last round of questions. Assalamu alaikum. Sarah Muhammad from the development program. What are the measures taken by the Qatari government to strengthen the political participation of Qatari women in Qatar? Assalamu alaikum. Afrah Lataibi, doctor student. Afrah Lataibi. Doctor, I have a question regarding the marginalization of some when it comes to the political participation, the voting rights, and what is the impact on the society in the future. Third question. Assalamu alaikum. Asma al-Fawri. Al-Fawri. I have two questions. What is lacking at the level of Gulf countries in order for them to get a stable and continuous political participation level? And did international pressure play a role in terms of the activation of a Shura Council based on elections? Thank you. When it comes to Sister Sarah, of course, when it comes to the role of women, thank God, in Qatar, since the days of the Father Emir, the reign of the Father Emir led to strengthening the role of the participation of women, and Sheikh Moza bint Nasser played a major role and gave particular attention to Qatari women and the necessity for women to participate in the development and progress of the country. And the first thing, as I have mentioned, the first thing that the women in Qatar received were political rights. This is not something simple. Qatar actually led the way and had the right to vote at the level of the municipality. So, as we know, municipality elections is the first step towards parliamentary elections. Women are ministers, undersecretaries, deans, managers, human rights officer, member of the Shura Council. What do you want more? Everything uh, is available for women. So the human rights actually told us, you are giving everything to women, leave something for us men. So the role of women is very present in Qatar. And when it comes to Afrah Al-Atebi, Afrah, I'm sorry, we cannot hear the question without the microphone. There was not exclusion or marginalization. We need to know that there are political rights, economic and cultural and social rights. The political rights are called civil rights, or civic rights, or political rights. There are absolute and relative rights. The absolute rights are like the economic, social, cultural. I'm not saying this is known. It is also stipulated by the laws of countries and states. These laws are given to all citizens with no exclusion: education, health, employment, etc. But political rights are relative. What do we mean by relative? It means that the there's categories at the level of the society that benefit from these rights. And this is not only implemented in Qatar. In Syria, the member of the parliament needs to have a Syrian mother and a Syrian father. So the political rights, when it comes to the pacts, the international pacts, they talk about the rights of identity or nationality. So they are granted per the law and the constitution of every country. So each country takes into account the political situation that it faces. In Qatar, we talked about the low demographic density and the principle of gradual move needs to be implemented. And His Highness the Emir, during his speech in front of the Shura Council, he said that instructions were given to the government in order to prepare studies in line with the constitutional amendments in order to take into account these things. So we're not talking about exclusion, but this is a gradual process. In Kuwait, 200,000 do not vote. There was no big fuss about it. And Bahrain, the same thing. But here, there, it was highlighted. Why? Because we needed culture. We needed to prepare and pave the way for political culture. Several of our brothers, when they knew that their other rights are intact, they accepted. When it comes to political rights, some people do not vote. Nothing is mandatory when it comes to using the political rights. So His Highness the Emir promised to find solutions gradually to these things. When it comes to Asma's question, Asma, the participation, yes? I'm sorry, I cannot hear the political participation in Gulf countries. It's up to each country. The Ummah Council, there's 50 members in Kuwait, and also there's the ministers. The ministers need to be representative, and also in Bahrain they have two chambers, the Shura and the Parliament or the House. And Oman, same thing, two chambers. And the Emirates, I think they have one, and Saudi they have one. So this is up to each country, each state. For instance, you know what's happening in Kuwait now. This might hinder and obstruct the whole process. So the unknown is there. So it's actually based on the practice. In Kuwait, actually, there is no government currently. So I do not want to meddle in Kuwaiti affairs and say, why did you not form a government? This is up to each and every state. And Qatar, of course, does not meddle in internal affairs. Thank you. Thank you so much. We would like to thank Dr. Yousef for his lecture. Thank you so much, dear participants, for the interaction and for your questions and for being here. And we hope to see you in future meetings. And the next conference is on the 16th of March, highlighting the World Cup. Thank you so much.